Alrighty, Henry Ford and I are here again reading another old issue of Motor Trend. This one's a pretty unique one. It comes from February of 1967, and it has the car of the year, which is the Mercury Cougar. So I'm going to show you some highlights of this this magazine. This is a very interesting edition. And I want to thank my friend Captain again for providing me with this to look over. Very interesting. Like before, I'm going to go through and show you some of the ads, which I find just almost as interesting as the articles. Here's one in the beginning here for the 67 Barracuda. You can see, give some of the details, and it's a pretty cool little car. Like I said, I'm a Ford guy, but that's a cool little car. What a neat little car with a 383. Boy, that'd have been fun. Anyways, here's the table of contents here. And like I said, this is volume 19, number 2, February of 67, Motor Trend. The car of the year, some special features, some road tests with a couple cutlasses, a Gullwing Tornado. We'll get to those here in a minute. Very interesting. And one of the more interesting articles in here talks about Henry Leland. As you know, he was the founder of Cadillac, but he also founded Lincoln, and it talks about how Henry Ford bought out Lincoln, and that's a great article. In fact, I'll probably do a separate video on that. I find that very fascinating. So let's go through here and get my notes out of the road here. So this is a pretty interesting, the way we see it. It's kind of like the editor's column here, and basically it talks about the government and Ralph Nader putting all these policies in place and changes, and how the auto manufacturers are slow to react and slow to stand up for their own rights. And it's, read this section right here, which I think is pretty interesting. Detroit, your unbelievable reluctance to stand up and fight just might lead to electric cars by default. And it's interesting, they go on to talk about how by the 80s we might be driving electric cars, and it's just funny that they're still not really even out. They're not perfect. You know, there's the electric Focus coming out, the Nissan Leaf. We can remember the EV1 from GM back into, what was that, the early 90s or whatever. So that's a very interesting article though. Let's see what else we have. Here's a pretty neat advertisement here for Dodge racing in NASCAR, and it's just cool. And you can see the cars actually, the NASCAR cars actually look like what you could buy at your dealership. Wow. Nothing like now, or what does Ford race? A Taurus or something in NASCAR that's not rear-wheel drive, not V8 powered. What a joke. That's a joke. What else is on here that's pretty interesting? Talk about some old cars here that people collect. It's pretty interesting, the cars they mentioned: Kaisers, Fraziers, Hudsons, Nash, Studebakers, DeSotos, and Willys. And basically the argument by the author of this article is that they're collectible regardless of what Motor Trend says. So I thought that was pretty interesting. This is a neat article here, and the person writes in and basically says how all the auto manufacturers, well, GM in particular, basically just steal from each other and for styling and technology and whatnot. And it's neat what they write back. It's Motor Trend says, contrary to popular belief, the engineers and stylists of the 5 auto divisions of GM don't work in one big room exchanging ideas and small talk. Then it talks about how they're each competitive in different divisions and separate. I'm not so sure that that's true anymore, but at one time that was the case. I mean, you could see the differences from Pontiac versus Buick versus Oldsmobile, and it was just a different time back then. Very interesting read there, though. This may perhaps be the coolest advertisement, and it says, do you trust your wife? And it's a Shelby advertisement. I'll read it for you. You can when she's driving a GT350 or GT500. Performance cars, emphatically, but in the Carroll Shelby tradition of safe performance. That's why the GT350 and GT500 feature a competition-approved overhead safety bar, eye level turn indicators and brake light, disc front brakes, wide path nylon high performance tires, modified suspension, adjustable shock absorbers, and crisp 16:1 steering ratio. And it goes on to talk about even more, mentions the 428 cubic inch engine. Just a really, really cool advertisement. I'm not sure how women would react to it now, but wow. To own either one of those, a 350 or a 500, would be incredible. Here we go, back to one of my favorite sections. It's called the Detroit Spotlight, and it's interesting. This one is entitled "The Battle of Materials Goes On," and they talk about new plastics that DuPont is coming out with for the cars. I guess DuPont came out with a thing called Zytel 101, which is a nylon plastic, and it's just interesting to see how things have changed in the 60s, because in the 50s most cars, metal was definitely more predominant, but it was becoming, not like they are nowadays, but plastics and polyesters and things of that nature were becoming more and more prevalent even by the 60s. And it even mentions in the article below, which is pretty neat here, talks about the plastic gas tanks, which are potential lifesavers, and it mentions those in some GM's products here. And then of course over here it talks about new plastic plants springing up to serve the industry. So, like I said, it's becoming more and more prevalent here by 1967, which is interesting. They mention here, let's see, Pontiac introduced ABS grills in 66 models. Chevy, Buick, and Olds have had them on some 67s. Next year is Chrysler's turn. So the grills took a turn away from steel and went into plastic. So that's an interesting article there. It's pretty neat. Here's an interesting article about the Camaro, which I thought was pretty cool. And it talks about the newly announced Z28, and that's really cool. Basically, let's see, comes with a 302 V8, a new size made possible by combining the existing 283 block with a crankshaft from a 327. Horsepower and torque are, of course, known, but have not been announced at this writing. But if it follows GM's self-imposed formula unrelated to any dynamometer readings of maximum of 1 horsepower per 10 pounds of car, the published figure will be approximately 290 horsepower. Then they show the picture of the Z28, so that's pretty cool. That's a really, really cool. I mean, to think that was the beginning of the Z28, that's pretty neat. Here it mentions the 396 with a 3-speed turbo hydromatic. Let's see. So that mentions that in let's see, certain aggressive speed limit. It also mentions the 427 here. Here it says a 396 turbojet V8 with 325 horse and coupled with 3-speed turbo hydromatic, both straight out of production. Big Chevrolets and Chevelle SS models was a logical compromise at the factory level. It also carries a full warranty of 50,000 miles or 5 years, whichever comes first. Production of these in both hardtop and convertible form is now in full swing. That's pretty cool. Back then, that was quite a warranty. 50,000 miles, 5 years. Now you'll see the 10-year, 100,000 miles and whatnot, but back in the 60s, that wasn't a joke. That was pretty impressive. Here it also, once again, like in my other video, automakers told of safety requirements. So the National Highway Safety Agency is bringing some more information to, let's see, to change in 67 model standards to eliminate frost and fog conditions on windshields, requirements for performance of windshield wiping and washing systems. It goes on and on and on. Once again, the government, wow, it's incredible. It's amazing how much money that the government adds, or how much cost, I should say, the government adds to each price of the new automobile. You may have seen the article where with the new CAFE standards by the Obama administration, then GM said that'll add at least $3,000 to each car. I think the standard's 54.5 miles per gallon across the fleet, so that's pretty interesting. But alrighty, let's transition here into the next